It is a great, great pleasure to introduce Judge Bruce Einhorn. From 1979 to 1990, he was the chief investigating prosecutor in the Justice Department for the Nazi criminals who had escaped to the United States. And from 1990 to 2007, he was a judge. He is the author of 5 books. He is also taught law at Oxford and is currently teaching law as well at Pepperdine. I can think of no better person to comment on what you just saw than the eminent Judge Bruce Einhorn.
I want to thank you all for coming to the performance. It was an exceptional performance. It really was done very, very well. Acted, written, directed very well. This play and the movie that you may have seen on the same subject is a fictionalization of one of the subsequent proceedings that came after the initial International Military Tribunal proceedings involving Goering and 21 other major war criminals. Hitler escaped those proceedings, he killed himself. Himmler escaped those proceedings, he killed himself. But among those who survived at the very top level, they were involved in the original proceedings, and the U.S., the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and France all had judges that acted as finders of fact and law. When those proceedings were done, the Allies jointly issued an order creating subsequent tribunals for other major, but not the initial major, war criminals, and also middle-level war criminals. Most of those proceedings that were held in Nuremberg afterwards, as a practical matter, however, were American proceedings, acting on behalf of all of the United Nations, the official name of the Allies. And so you often saw, as in this case, U.S. judges brought over from the States, presiding as jurors and judges in a bench trial involving the subsequent proceeding defendants. There were cases that were typed by class. So you had a case against the Einsatzgruppen, high officials of the mobile action killing squads that killed millions of Jews, Roma, and Sinti, as well as communists, before the death camps were created. In fact, the reason the death camps were created in part was that when the Soviets held their ground in the winter of 1941-42, the Nazis decided that it was so cold they still couldn't have these mobile action killing squads kill everyone because they couldn't bury them in open fields because they couldn't break ground. It was so cold. If you've been to the Soviet Union, you know this to be true. So they started building stationary death camps. In any event, there was the Einsatzgruppen trial. There was a case involving doctors who had experimented on individuals, including Jehovah's Witnesses, Jews, pacifists, etc. And there was the famous ministries or justice cases involving judges and prosecutors who had worked for the Nazi state and had allegedly participated in crimes against humanity. And this play is a superb fictionalization of those proceedings. There was a defendant, his name was not Yanning, who was a more sympathetic figure. He was very high-ranking, and he was convicted. And in its judgment, the tribunal noted that he was a person that was almost a tragic figure, not a tragic hero, but that he still deserved to be held criminally responsible because he knew what was going on better than anyone, and he did it. There was another person more like Emil Hahn, the fanatic, played so well by Mr. Hamlin. There were all sorts of defendants that mirror the defendants that are fictionalized here. And the Feltenstein case, which was not called Feltenstein, really did exist, although Yanning was not involved as the judge. It was another judge. But that case really did exist. And the Gentile woman who was accused of having sex with the Jewish man who was hanged, she was imprisoned for several years. In any event, this case is important to me personally, but I hope to everyone, because it involves individuals who should have been the bulwark against the Nazi spread of their racist and persecutorial ideology. I am the principal draftsman of the Refugee Act of 1980, the asylum statute under which refugees have come to this country since the time of the Iranian Revolution. So depending on how you feel about that, I'll either say you're welcome or give me 5 minutes to run. But I can tell you that in every single country that has been characterized by a history of persecution, each of those nations has one thing in common with all the others, and that is the lack of an independent judiciary. If there is one thing that marks these countries, these police states, it is that they all have non-independent, submissive judiciaries. In America, people claim about how federal judges are too egomaniacal, too assertive, too tough on everybody. I would much, and I say this, of course, with prejudice for obvious reasons, but I would much live in a country with ornery, curmudgeonly, and very assertive judges who don't take the government's word for granted than a country where judges just follow orders. Because when judges follow orders, nothing's left. I mean, if judges are afraid of standing up, everyone's going to be a victim or otherwise afraid of standing up. And this play illustrates the legal and moral issue that should be implicated whenever people in positions of power, as if they themselves were in the same position as those they judged. And I can tell you, in all my work in the Nazi cases, I did not find one person who was hanged or thrown in a concentration camp who, as an SS man or as a judge or a prosecutor, refused an order. The worst that would happen is they would be broken, held in disrepute, fired, and maybe jailed for a little while. They all survived. Saying no was possible. It was difficult, but it was possible. And when the bulwark against executive and legislative tyranny, the judiciary, starts cowering to that tyranny, pretty much all is lost. The government is not going to be a government of laws. It's going to be a government of arbitrary power by those men who have it, and of cowardice in the face of that power by those who should have an equal amount of power to push back. Somebody has to stand up against the forces of history, of evil, hold up a hand and say no. And that should be a judge. And it should, if it isn't a judge, it's not going to be anyone else in the system. That's what I learned from all this.
Thank you so much. This was terrific. Thank you.